I have not been going through hell. Are you kidding me? I swear to God, people. Life could not be better. Peppermint Pat, hello. Cess Runner, hello. Missing Parts, who? Firefly, who? Hip, who? Nice. Nice.
And we're only really here because thus far you've been right.
What now? Oh, I totally get what you're saying there. Yeah, my bad. CS Runner. Thank you, Mr. Schoenberger, for that wonderful, wonderful music.
Patrick P. Shit.
Nice. Oh, we gotta
Patrick
get
P.
you.
Shit. He used to be with Google. He used to be with Google.
He used to be with
Same
Google.
response, sir.
Patrick P. Shit. Patrick P. Shit.
Same response, sir.
He used to be with Google. He used to be with Google.
Damn it, it didn't time out my
Oh,
thing.
Patrick Pichet.
P. Shit. Patrick P. Shit. He used to be with Google.
Nice.
Guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizen can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals.
Yes. Into it tonight. Hello and welcome to the American Awakening. PFC Bergy reporting for duty. This is going to be a good show tonight, my friends. We need to have a conversation. But we all need to be educated a little bit. We need to make sure that where we get the information from is a reliable source. And when the information that you need to understand and be absorbing is information about misinformation and disinformation, it makes that quite the challenge. Sound is low. Well, let me turn that up a little bit. How's that? Is that a little bit better? Here we go. How's that? A little bit better? Let me do this. And I'll put there. Now this should be better. Testing. 1, 2. Awesome. Thanks, Missing Parts. So, what I've done is I've put together... Let me do this here. Shit. Let me go here. I'm going to start with PSYWAR. Come on. Change the page. There we go. So let me jump over here. Capture full. Nice. So I put together a page. If you go to freedomstream.tv/PSYWAR, PSYWAR, boom, you will have access. And this is like anybody, although I will be making some of this stuff available early to my Patreon supporters, because you guys are awesome, and your help is so much appreciated. I'm telling you what, I've had to slowly but surely thin out the resources that I have, my ability to put this stuff out, but it's my Patreon supporters that have really been able to help keep me going with that, right? So it's really appreciated. You can help support at freedomstream.tv or at patreon.com/American Awakening. But so I set this series page up, and each of my shows, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, up until around, the 23rd or something like that, is going to be... another part of series that focuses on PSYWAR, the military use of psychological warfare, as it relates, though, specifically to in this age of social networks, right? So I've set up this page. It'll be available to everyone, and or it is available to everyone even now. And as we do, this was the show from Monday here, and as we do them, they will just be added here until we get all 10 of them. Then after that, as we launch into the new year, what we want to do is have this kind of get everybody on base and set up for what the primary focus is going to be over the next couple of years during the election, and that is going to be social media, psychological warfare, as it pertains to election influence, largely because, I don't need to tell anybody that within, we've already got Trump, who's announced he's running. Hell, the election's already started for 2024. Don't kid yourself. So that's going to be our focus, not voting machines or anything like that, right? Here we go. Gosh, Berg reminds me of the Peter Pan in the photo on the left. Which one? I don't know what I'm not sure what I'm talking about. This one. Okay. Let me jump into this here. So this is tonight's show. And actually, let me do this. Go to that and host. Let me do this. And before I get started into this, although I want to keep focused on this, just a couple quick things I'd like to throw out there. Elmer Stewart Rhodes, the pirate guy, was charged with seditious conspiracy, and found guilty. That's significant. It's the first one in he and one other person so far, and these are the first people to have that happen since, we're talking a long freaking time. That's basically treason, my friends, and I don't believe that that's the last one. My episodes are definitely going to be focused on the social media, the military component of it, but I'm going to have to be adding some things in between to kind of bring you guys up to date on that, like my former attorney Kelly, her romance with him allegedly, but they say allegedly, but she told me flat out. So there's a lot of stuff, that's going on, and I believe Kelly's going to be going to court here real soon. She tried to set me up from day one. There's a whole just series of people that were involved in a active engagement targeting me, my book, my proximity to Byrne, Flynn, Giuliani, Tory, Milley, Gavin. It was just across the gamut attack right after beginning shortly after January 6th, and basically continuing up to today. But there's not much they can do at this point, so that's good. Not much they can do more at this point, and I'm quite self-sufficient. And as you can see, the things are changing, like with the conviction of Stewart Rhodes. Akbar's on doing broadcasts and such. You got all of these damn grifters out there. This is going to be spectacular the next coming years. But what you want to do is you want to understand that there is a lot more behind this. And I believe that even we're going to find that people with legitimate former connections to First and Eighth and Fourth, you're going to find that people with former connections that, like Flynn, in the leadership connections, have, I believe, based on information and belief, I believe that there are assets, that Tory even may have assets. And when I say assets, I mean people that follow her show, people that have that have a shared interest, that have a shared narrative, right? They're each writing their own story, but they have a shared narrative. this is going to be explained to you by the U.S. military psychological warfare people here in just a moment. Now, the people that we're talking about here that we're going to be doing a review on are the Force Psychological Operations Group. Let me read this here real quick. In part, and you can be easier to go along here. Hold on, capture full. So in part 1 of our 10-part series, I touched a bit at first on a more archetypal origin story, and then showed a few clips from the U.S. Army Force Psychological Operations Group, 4th POG, out of Fort Bragg, and some of its surrounding organizational structure, like the 8th POG, which the 4th now falls under, as I understand. I also touched a bit on my personal experience providing contract support to the 4th POG in Baghdad, Iraq, 2007, 2008. During that time, I worked for Major Brad Burris, the IAA chief, on the PSYWAR program I was providing contract support for. Brad later went on to be the commander of the 8th POG. Although I spent from 2007 to 2010 largely supporting contracts under the 4th POG, with the exception of the contract I worked for IOTF, the Information Operations Task Force in Kabul, providing many of the same IT services. So what that's saying is I worked basically for 3 years providing contract support in one way or another to the psychological operations, the 4th POG. But I want to make clear, I wasn't I can't wear their unit patch. That was under contract support. The unit patch I wear is JCSE, the Joint Communication Support Element out of Tampa, out of MacDill. I was signal support there. And my work was different, but I did provide kind of support to similar... No, actually, I really didn't do much at all in that area, in uniform, in the area of PSYOP. So, and again, my MOS was not PSYOP. My MOS in uniform was, while I was a signal support, was it 26 Charlie, 25 Bravo, which was networks. But that was just kind of like, I was officially like 26 Charlie, but they had just changed it over. So it's been like over a decade. Give me a break. But nonetheless, I respect the sacred oath I swore with my clearance and have no intentions of violating that. What I speak about is what's happening right here, right now in the USA, and I'm not even sure the Army understands what they are doing or the problem. This is what we will continue to explore in Ghosts in the Machine, PSYWAR Part 2. And what we have here, what we're going to be focused on tonight is narrative warfare. And it's really, this is going to blow your minds, right? My issue is not with psychological warfare. Well, it is, obviously. My issue is not in trying to define what parameters or bounds that PSYOP should be used in. My argument is, at the moment, it needs to be entirely put on pause. I believe that basically there's a very good chance, and again, based on information and belief, that the military's psychological operations, in its rightful attempt to protect America from threats, foreign and domestic, its advancements and developments in psychological warfare utilizing social networks was, understandable. In this image here, at the top, that is me with some Iraqis. And this is, where did I put that? Did I not upload that? This could be it. Yeah, clip. This may have what I was looking for in it, but I don't think I uploaded the proper one.
Amid concern over fake news, as myriad actors grapple to dominate amid complex informational threats, audiences lose autonomy in their legitimate claim over this space as vulnerabilities are exploited. Whether domestic or foreign, when seen as information terrain or operational battle space, people are not sufficiently considered as also actors holding equity in the information environment of their own minds. Let me repeat. People are not sufficiently considered as holding equity in the information environment of their own mind.
Let's call the PAO journalists. Because if you're an American and you're a journalist and you're working for the PAO and you then leave there and go to work for someone else, like let's say USA Today later on, and you were paid to write articles for the PAO in the military, or let's say you're in the Navy. Let's say you work for a public affairs office in the Navy, and let's say you're paid to do a certain narrative or put a certain story out, and then you leave that job. Can you be trusted, having been paid to disseminate a narrative before by the Defense Department, to be sitting in that chair telling people what they're supposed to be trusted to believe? So when the PAO pays someone overseas to disseminate a narrative and that person comes back and goes to work,
What we're defending is the people's right to know.
as a journalist in the U.S., how do you know? Their trust has been destroyed. That was the argument Emma was trying to make in that. That was the argument that the PAO, the Public Affairs Office, that was the debate they were having with the PSYOP. If you are damaging the credibility of our establishment, then you are endangering First Amendment protections. You're endangering the freedom of the press. You're damaging the Constitution.
If we continue to accept or even participate in the use of military-grade PSYOPs by mainstream media, social media influencers, and bloggers alike in order to control the narrative and counter-narrative, we risk not only losing a free, healthy, and independent press, but we risk losing our minds.
I think some of us have already lost our minds. Probably present company included. There we go. That's on. We're good there. So I've been trying to speak out about the military use of psychological warfare for years. It wasn't until I came back to the States in 2015 that I really saw what was going on. Why did I see that? Well, it's because this was my job. This was where I was. Here we go.
It's the keys to the kingdom.
Hey, why'd that stop?
Very nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, you can't say you don't have the keys to the kingdom. With the bling bling.
That's awesome.
You get it, Jamil?
That's perfect.
You see up in the upper corner there?
That took a long time to get that guy masked back behind me.
Where is that? Is that in a...
So it's important. I think it's important to establish credibility, right? So many people out there try to tell you, well, this is what's going on, that's what's going on, and I did this, I was a spy with that. They don't provide any evidence of it. Well, I can't because no. They do that because they're freaking grifters. There's nobody. If you were working a contract, you're gonna have receipts. If you were working anything, you're gonna be able to show it. There's no one that can't be able to do that. At least show that you were there. You work for things. I can't sit there. There are things I can't sit here and talk about. I held an above top secret clearance. But there's the majority of it I can, what were we doing? We were working with the PAO and such to disseminate unclassified information, to targets throughout a specific area. Now what I can't do is say, well, we were targeting this with this and we were using this amount of people and we had this. No. That's when you start violating classified national security stuff, and they come out and they lock you up. I was an information assurance security officer for a decade. I'm highly confident of what I'm saying here and the accuracy of it, regardless of what any of these people might say. So I also have that DOD letter here, and I think that's important. Showing my work in IIA by the IIA chief. They're all completely verifiable by any journalist out there that wants to. So these things are important. Now, narrative warfare. What I wanted to do here is to start out.
To go ahead and
stop here.
And start.
Bing. So, just to give you guys a little bit of background on this. Let me go more full screen so it's easier to read. Got my disclaimer. This is a U.S. Department of Defense. This is from 1st Special Forces Command. This is Colonel Jeremy Mouchard. Is the commander of the 8th Psychological Operations Group Airborne, located at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. At the 8th POG. Now, like I said, so his job, this guy right here, almost certainly replaced Major Burris, right? And that's all, obviously, that's easy to verify, right? Very easy to verify. So these are important to understand. So what they're doing is they are having a conversation. What is the title of this, by the way? Headquarters, Army 3rd POB, supports operations around the globe, especially expeditionary teams tailored to teams tailor fit to execute print, AV, and broadcast activities. This unit also houses the Information Warfare Center. I believe that's actually the John F. Kennedy Information Warfare Center, but I could be mistaken there, but I don't think I am. It used to be called that. I think it got changed, and that's what they were talking. These guys talk about it in another one. But let me get going with this because, believe it or not, this is like an hour long. But I'll sit here. I've already babbled on for 25 minutes, so we got to get tearing into this because there's a lot to go over. The lady is Dr. Ajit Maan, and the other guy is Lieutenant Colonel retired Brian Steed, an instructor of military history at the U.S. Army Command and General Staff. Now, again, these people are all way smarter than me, all right? I'm not sitting here trying to say, oh, look, No. These people are way smarter. But they have freaking far superior educations. But I tell you, like the woman, for example, if you compare her when you're watching this, compare how the woman speaks, her knowledge, her use of nomenclature, very specific to this, just what she says. And try to contrast that with someone like Tori, who claims to have the same background and experience, yet uses none of the same nothing. It's all garbage. And then you have the gentleman down there who definitely is a contractor, probably married, but possibly close to divorce, not sure, because of his questionable choice of tie, although I would probably wear it for sure. And then, again, we got the colonel there, Mustafa. And, again, that colonel replaced almost, I think, unless there was another one between them, replaced Major Burris, right? So that's where I'm coming from on this. Now, this is spectacular. Let me get going into this here. Hold on.
It's off here.
Okay. Well, I often talk to people about the difference in the way that we use the word narrative.
And by the way, let me make sure this is up all the way. But by the way, in the show notes, I've kind of marked out times, right? So that, well, let me do this. Okay, I could just take this out. There. That's good. And then I can go here. But it's not the whole window. That was a waste of time. Hold on. Let me put that. Will it? No, it won't. Let me put it back in there. You guys have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay, let me bring this over here. This way, because I do actually kind of have to follow along a little bit with the numbers, because I got like in the 15-minute mark, I've got misinformation. Okay, so there we go. So let me get. No, I can't see it there. I can do this. Hold on. I'm sorry, folks. This will work. And then this. And that works perfectly. So I can still go down my things here. There we go. And even if I go there, I'm lost. So, here we go.
As opposed to some, information or stories or messaging, things like that. I use the term, it comes out of narrative identity theory. It's a psychological and philosophically based idea of how identity is created in part through the stories we tell about ourselves. And when it comes to narrative warfare, the difference, I think, if I understand what information warfare is, I think the difference is that narrative warfare isn't really warfare over the information, but it's warfare or...
Can you guys hear that okay? Here we go. Now listen, I got to back that up a bit because I was... Hey, can I do this? There we go.
Fair. The difference, I think, if I understand what information warfare is, I think the difference is that narrative warfare isn't really warfare over the information, but it's warfare or struggle or conflict over the meaning of the information. So that means, for example, when disinformation takes, when people or individuals just stick to their belief in certain disinformation despite facts and truths and statistics and information you can give them to the opposite. They do that because the disinformation is more meaningful to them than the information, than the truth.
Haven't you asked yourself why sometimes I'm guilty of this. Everybody I know is guilty of this, and that is allowing yourself to follow a story because it fits your narrative, knowing that you might not always have all the information. Even knowing that you don't have all the information, sometimes even knowing that it's a lie, because and then people start getting into the greater good thing and all sorts of stuff. This is good.
And what does that mean, more meaningful? Ultimately, bottom line, what it means is it promotes and boosts their sense of self. It's their identity that it's meaningful to. And that's the bottom line meaning, right? Who you are and, what you believe in. So that's so there are two main parts to narrative warfare that are just essential to understand, and that is that it has everything to do with identity, and it has everything to do with meaning. And of course, there isn't just one identity. Identity has layers. So the more, in terms of influence, the more layers of identity you trigger, the more influential you'll be.
Yeah, I think I'd be interested
to expand even a little bit beyond what she's saying. I've shown you algorithms that are written that takes all of the accumulated data and the analytics and builds the predictive behavior models that actually allow them to very specifically target those specific groups with specific stories to fit specific narratives. As this guy will say down later, a narrative, a narrative like an archetypal type one, it's like a river. Eventually, they don't make huge moves, but eventually they can carve off into different directions. And I got to let them get this. It's spectacular.
Understand your perspective on.
You'll want to go back over
on
this,
where we
Squirrel.
stand as a government and being able to do that. And I can give a little perspective on this because, at the National Security Council level, very much so, a lot of what they will talk about in terms of whole of government effort is we have to have the right narrative for the U.S. government. But it seems to be a very inward-looking kind of a narrative development process.
I know I've met this guy before. The more I look at this now, the Mustaf, I can't pronounce his name. I've absolutely met this guy before. I could not tell you where.
Process, right? And doesn't take into account really those audiences in the same kind of way. And I think maybe they think they leave it to the individual.
Thanks to everyone on YouTube for tuning in tonight as well, and everyone on Twitch.
Embassies, public diplomacy, sections or things like that to kind of craft it the right way based on the audiences. But I think maybe there's a different approach we should take at the strategic level to help account for that. But I'm interested in your.
Now, okay, let's let him go. The next segment I want to go to is at the 15-minute mark, but I want to let her say something here real quick.
Thoughts on kind of at the higher up level where you see that we would actually engage in the right fashion.
Yeah, so that's kind of difficult in that what happens is, and here's where the difference between stories and narratives comes in. It's pretty clear that we have a national narrative. It's somewhere located in our Constitution. But the stories that we tell about it are so different. So narratives, how I think of them, are things that are in our cultural environment, in our social environment.
Can we just say what the fuck's going on with the tapestry behind this lady's? There's a lot going on right there. She's definitely involved in psychological warfare.
And we internalize them pretty early on, pre-verbally. And then we live by them in a kind of, in a way that we're not highly conscious of. And stories, though, we're highly conscious of. We're highly conscious of telling them, listening to them, talking about them. You know, movies are made about narratives, but the movies, the novels, all that stuff, those are stories. They reference a narrative. Those that are familiar with the narrative get the story. They can get what a 3-word tweet means, just a message that messages a story that refers to a narrative. So if you're not familiar with that narrative, stories don't make sense, and the tweets don't make sense, and all the.
You see what they're saying? Did you catch what she just said right there? You know, some people are so tuned to it that they can get what those memes are, and just using like 3 words or something. I've got a meme of Akbar here. Well, you know, here, let me show you Akbar here real quick. Well, I'm not going to show... Well, can I? Hold on. No. Okay, so let me do this. I'm just going to play this from the site.
I will call up some friends to dust off some accounts from the Great Meme War, and we'll see who the OG is.
All right, so that was our friend Ali Akbar, a.k.a. Ali Alexander. He is quite the... Now, I can't play that without this, and I apologize.
Show me something natural like Afro with your pride. Show me something natural like ass with some stretch marks.
So that's... I know we went off a little bit right there, but sorry, Mr. Parts. The Akbar just always requires more context. So let's get back to this here.
The references don't make sense.
The part that I think is important is recognizing the critical role that stories play in connecting people to narrative. And this, I think, is in part where the U.S. government tends to miss these two, because we conflate the term narrative and the term story, and we don't recognize the difference between them and the different roles they play. So if every society has a narrative, and I would argue that most societies, especially complex ones, have more than one narrative. You might have a dominant narrative and then several other maybe minority narratives that exist. But then whoever's governing has a story for how that entity is going to solve for whatever, the dissonance of life with that narrative. So if I actually use American narratives more often than others because I think people can wrap their head around them. If the American narrative is the American dream, and whatever that means, like what's beautiful about a narrative, I don't need to explain it. You just know it means something, and it might mean something different to all of the people listening to this. But if that's the American narrative, then and we just went through a political campaign, which makes this even better. Each candidate is going to present their story for how to solve for the dissonance created between the narrative of living the American dream and the reality of life. So each person out there, whatever their vision of the American dream is, they're still struggling to achieve it. Now, maybe that's part of their narrative is a struggle and hard work and whatever. And so somebody who's trying to connect to that might have a story that says, I'm going to facilitate an environment where your hard work.
When he says someone trying to connect, he's referring to organizations like Cambridge Analytica. Again, how many people that worked for Cambridge Analytica came out of military PSYOP? How many people come out of military PSYOP, go straight into working campaigns? How many people go out of military PSYOP straight into news? Right? We saw that in part 1, where they were showing all the great opportunities available with becoming part of the PSYOP unit, the 8th, the 4th, the 3rd, 1st. And what do we got here? Truth is light. I was hoping they were going to let Bergy back on Twitter. Did you put some disinformation about COVID up? No, I never talk about COVID or any of that stuff. Well, at least not in any way like that. What does Wicked Shih Tzu say here? You might be interested in an economic book called Okay Boomer, Let's Talk. There's a section on it. Talk about. Not sure about that. Miss Parts. Well, men may say because. Okay. So that's lost me. I was hoping they were gonna. I did submit a request. Request Truth is Light to Twitter to get at PFC 40 book back. Right. That was important. And at PFC at Patrick Bergy 65, I had that for years. That sucks. And it's kind of, while I'm talking about that for a second, I liked, I lost all of the DMs and everything when they took down Twitter, both of them, one or both. Most recently, the at Patrick Bergy 65. So, a lot of these people online will make a comment now or something. They'll have new things, and I don't know who they are or can't keep them always straight. I have trouble with people's names anyway, always had, right? I remember the important things, oddly enough. Well, so anyway, I'm going to get talking forever if I don't get back to this.
Work will pay off with success, and that each person is going to be treated equally so that your hard work will not be treated more harshly or more beneficial than somebody else's hard work. So the challenge is when we go abroad, as Ajit said, we kind of have an American narrative. I mean, it is in the Constitution of the United States. It's in our Declaration of Independence. It's in our national security strategy, our national military strategies. We tend to re-emphasize that narrative.
Towards the end, he makes he digs into the 16th and the 2016 and 2020 in an incredible way. Like I said, you're going to want to go back over this again later, and I'm not trying to freaking sell clicks here. I kind of need to. I don't make anything off of YouTube myself. And clearly these guys are not making money because it's a government organization, and that's a complicated thing when it comes to bringing in money for taxpayer-funded stuff. But again, they kind of make their rules up as they go along with some of these things.
Over and over again. But what we don't typically recognize is what is our story to address the dissonance in a given region or a specific country. And so more to your audience as guys who do PSYOPs stuff, what they have to recognize is the very fact that they're in a country means that there's significant dissonance between the governing story and the societal narrative.
Okay, so stop right there. What he's saying is that if there's an active PSYOP mission or unit deployed in your country, then there is dissidence. There's dissonance within the culture of that country, not resonance. And so one of my concerns, again, on Friday, the part 3 is going to go into 91st Cyber and asking the question, what the fuck was ShadowNet Enterprise, and why was it deployed, according to 91st Cyber, nationwide across our country? And if that ShadowNet Enterprise has any of the capabilities what it described in general did, of the capabilities of the ShadowNet, although we didn't call it the ShadowNet in Iraq, I can't tell you what we called it there. The ShadowNet's what we called it when we made it commercially available. So if that's what the 91st Cyber is operating, and there's a cyber unit operating within America, that's a problem. But it also is a problem that is answered right here by this guy who would probably be involved with it.
You wouldn't be there if the governing story narrative connection was working perfectly. One, it never works perfectly.
Don't
but
blame us.
There's clearly massive disruption that exists, or the United States military PSYOP community wouldn't be present. So
listen, if your country wasn't so fucked up, we wouldn't have to be there. So don't go blaming the PSYOP guys.
So already dissonance exists between the story narrative connection. Depending on which side of this we're on, like if we're opposed to the government, then what we want to do, and we always want to do these two things simultaneously. On one hand, we want to increase dissonance between the story of those we oppose and the societal narrative.
Pay attention.
And we want to increase resonance between the story of the side we favor and the societal narrative. So we're both pulling things together and pushing things apart simultaneously. And I think that concept
as opposed to
is not understood at the government level, and it's not understood at the operator level. That this is why it matters. This is why, to me, narrative matters even for the lowest ranking soldier. Because as he's walking down the street in some community in some distant country, his behavior is either increasing resonance or increasing dissonance. He's either, if he's violating societal norms, then what he's doing is, and we were invited there by the host government, then we are increasing the dissonance that exists between the governing story and the societal narrative. If he's behaving well, if he's doing things that are good, then we're increasing the resonance between that governing story and societal narrative. And to me, this is the key operational element, is recognizing, you have to recognize what the underlying societal narrative is, how they interpret the world, but you also have to recognize what are the competing stories and how those stories are or are not connecting to the populace. And then we're either targeting the opposing story to increase that dissonance, or we are, and at the same time trying to increase the resonance of the governing story, if we will, or the friendly story. I hope that addresses that. I just see,
wants to decrease the
my
resonance
experience
of the friendly
is
story.
Even folks who understand regions very well do not recognize this complexity of story and narrative in those societies. They might get the culture, they might get the language, they might understand the history, but they don't recognize that narrative. One of many reasons why I have been appreciative of 2020, and I know that's almost heretical to say that, is that 2020 has laid bare a lot of this within the United States. These competing narratives and then the various stories that exist to try to solve for those. And to me, that's an easy place to start, because most people in 2020 can recognize that there are different stories, and they might also recognize that there are different narratives. So without getting political, because I know military folks are very averse to getting political, and this isn't to judge one narrative or the other, but I would suggest that in 2020 you saw very different narratives, in the sense that there are people, and I posited 3 narratives in a blog post I wrote, but you kind of have the America is awesome narrative, you have the I have a dream narrative, and you have the America is horribly flawed, institutional America is horribly flawed. So the 1619 narrative, that we are based off of slavery and its problems. And why appreciating that matters is when I deal with somebody who is filtering the world through a 1619 narrative, which I don't filter the world through, I need to recognize that they're not doing it. Some people might be, but most people who adhere to a narrative, they're not being manipulative. That is how they interpret the world. So when they see a black man getting shot by a police officer, they are interpreting that as a racist act, irrespective of any of the details, because that's how they interpret the facts. Whereas an America is awesome narrative person would be, well, that policeman probably had a reason. Like, that would be their initial interpretation of those facts. And then it would take significant facts on both sides to the contrary of that narrative to potentially convince that person that the other thing is true. And too often, even in American discourse, we attribute bad motives to people who have different narratives, rather than recognizing, no, they just have a different narrative. And we have to appreciate that, otherwise you can't talk. And so to me, it would be a useful thing, although I don't know how many commanders would be comfortable doing it, to start off talking about American competing narratives, and then recognize as you go abroad, those same dynamics, and in many cases even more, exist elsewhere. Because almost every country I interacted with, and that was quite a few, had multiple narratives. So Iraq has what you could call, to just be simplistic, a Sunni, a Shia, a Kurd narrative. And even within each of those communities, there might be one or more narratives that exist. And so appreciating all of those details.
Well, you know, and he's leaving out AQI, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, right? Which was loosely and largely foreign fighters coming in from Turkey and other areas to kind of cause chaos between the 3 that he just named.
Is part of how you effectively communicate and generate the resonance or dissonance. And I talked a long time, so I'll stop there.
Stop talking.
If I might add, I would say that what we need is a narrative analysis to begin to construct a narrative. We need to know, when we go into somebody's country, what is the narrative they're living by? And where we start, not end, but start, is with anthropological study. Then we have to go through, and you can't ask people, so what's your narrative?
So she's going to go into here, and this was kind of an area that I wanted to pull up for sure. Around the 20-minute mark, I have labeled as pathologizing the narrative, victimhood, convincing the target they're a victim, and common recruitment techniques. After that, we'll let it go into that, and then after that, I'll jump ahead to about the 35-minute mark, the meaning map.
They don't know what to say. Just like an American, if you ask an American, what's your narrative? They're going to go, what's that? Is that like a story? You mean, so you know what, you can't ask people to tell you what their narrative is, but you can ask them to tell you their stories. And they love to tell you that. What's the story you live by? What's going on here? What's this? You know, people love to tell you about themselves. And then what you need to do is collect those stories and see what's in common. There's going to be a common thread that's going to lead you down to their...
But hey, real quick, you know who doesn't like to tell you their stories? Or people that will lie about their stories? Are one of the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of assets that our government and other governments, this applies to Russia too. Russia's doing IIA operations of their own kind. Then what are their soldiers doing when they leave the Russian military? They're going back onto the economy. And what are they going to do with the skill sets that they have? Well, they're probably going to go start getting involved in campaigns and stuff. It's going to, what I'm pointing out here is universally bad for everyone. It doesn't require it doesn't require me to say, oh, look, I caught him psyoping right here. No, this is a cry, a call out to just say, hey, we need to maybe we need to put a pause on all of this, because maybe we are, in an attempt to protect ourselves, causing more harm than good by creating soldiers, then by putting them into situations that then do develop oftentimes PTSD, or other issues, or maybe they went in already with some issues. You know, from what I saw going through basic training at the age of 39, when you kind of pay attention to this, from what I saw, their standards weren't that high. I would argue they had lowered their standards just allowing me in. I'm not trying to be a dick to these people, right? But we're creating our own problem. We got about 3 minutes until I wanted to go into the break. So before that, I just, if you can, if you like what we're doing, I know we're going into the holiday season. I know for so many of us, things are really tight. And by God, if it's too tight, God bless you. But if you have, do have some extra resources, you like what I'm trying to do here, which, by the way, and part of the reason I don't get a lot of, almost entirely the reason that I lost a lot of the support that I have is your support. Well, God bless you, right? Thank you very much. I cannot allow that to buy my voice. You're not going to see me take a huge shift. I've been saying and trying to prove and trying to do the same thing pretty consistently and publicly since 2015. Written 3 books on it. But these things are hugely important. I believe if you can see what we have tonight, what we're talking about tonight, I am not in any way trying to villainize the people here. These are very respected, intelligent people. But I wonder if any one of them, and this is kind of like where it's like, okay, I get it. I'm just a freaking broke dick PFC. These guys are really freaking smart. I'm a molecule. But can they honestly say that they've given thought and consideration to what I see over the last couple years as this video right here being an example? It's legal what they're doing. It's legal what I'm doing. Should what they are doing right now, though, working with, funded by 4th, 8th, 3rd, 1st, the PSYOP, military PSYOP, should they be broadcasting the Department of Defense, which has always been separate? I don't know of any law. I don't know. Even you got the Smith-Mundt Act. That didn't include the DOD. they still kind of have to fall under their own memorandums of understanding. And like IIA has our, the policy that was posted online. Excuse me. So I don't understand how they're allowed to do this, but I want to just know, excuse me, these people are so smart. Why don't they see that these videos, their recruitment of cyber soldiers end up turning into how many cyber soldiers working for Flynn, General Flynn and his cyber warriors, how many of them were literally trained in the PSYOP community in uniform, or as a contractor like me? How many? I can't tell you that answer, but do I believe that there are elements within the 4th, 8th, 3rd, 1st? Do I believe that there are vulnerabilities all through that organization for these technologies, these capabilities? And keep in mind, these guys have massive server farms, all this stuff, that they might only use like 10% of it. Are they sure that the other 80%, 90% that's not being used by them, although built and funded for on another contract, isn't being used as a backdoor by people nefariously? I wonder about this. I question this. I do. What was the 91st Cyber doing in the United States of America with deploying something that sounds almost identical to what the ShadowNet was, and having it being called the ShadowNet Enterprise? We need to find these things out. It's 2 minutes after 8. I'm going to go into a commercial. Not a commercial, an intermission. I don't have really commercials. Well, I have a commercial. I could play a sport commercial, but I'm not going to. I'm going to go right into the intermission. I hope. And the problem was my hard drive. And I've got several drives, but yeah, my 5 terabyte drive that I have, SSD, is like filling up. I had to move all the stuff after the show. That was what was causing the problems for the show on Monday. One of the drives that writes that records the tonight's show that got full, and so that's why we kept having troubles. So if you're looking for something for a stocking stuffer for freedomstream.tv, a 1 to 5 terabyte SSD would be something that we would put here on our Christmas wish list. But so on that note, let's get into an intermission. We got space now, though. I moved all sorts of shit around last night.
They never make the same mistake twice.
God bless you, Patrick.
They make it 5 or 6 times, just to be sure.
Just to be sure. Thank you, Thomas Schoenberger. Amazing. I can't argue that can squatch. That is a problem. Remind me to answer that question, Cons Quatch, on YouTube.
Patrick P. Shit. Who used to be with Google. Who used to be with Google.
Same response, sir.
Patrick P. Shit. Patrick P. Shit.
Same response, sir.
Who used to be with Google. Who used to be with Google.
Oh, Patrick Pichet?
P. Shit. Patrick P. Shit. Who used to be with Google.
Same response, sir. Same response, sir.
Patrick P. Shit.
Oh, Patrick Pichet?
Patrick P. Shit. Who used to be with Google. Who used to be with Google.
Same response, sir.
Nice. Was that Patrick with the sniffles there? Again, it's getting sniffle season again, Patrick. Keep yourself healthy. Fred's still sick. Damn it. He's got it good, but I think he's doing a little bit better. I have the traditional one. Hey, Real Fire. You don't offer them anymore. Oh, the old, you got the old POTS line. They call those POTS lines. POTS. Plain old telephone. Uses what's called a twisted pair. That's where the twisted pair came from. That's where Cat 5, Cat 6, Cat 3, Cat whatever. Twisted pair. And those are the old phone lines. There we go. So back to the show. So as you can see, we've only got 18, 19 minutes into this, and I skipped 5 minutes. And we're in the second half. We're in the second half of the show, so got to get moving. He's not in the hospital, but he's just, he's recovering. He's doing better. Thank you.
Narrative. So an example that I use for American narratives is, or even just more generally, a sort of a Western structure of a narrative, is that of the rugged individual. Who, the hero of the journey, who separates himself out from the crowd, distinguishes himself in some way, and then journeys for something. Generally at the, in its beginning, middle, and an end. And at the end of the journey, he's changed in some important way. And Western audiences, we see this, repeated in all sorts of, stories. So a person may tell you.
I've never heard anything like that personally.
If you ask an American, a lot of Americans are going to have very similar stories about, I'm the little guy journeying, I'm the hero.
The molecule.
They may not say it like that, but I struggle. I started here at this place, and I'm aiming for something. And I'm struggling along the way, and I've got knocked down, and I've got back up, and so I'm like the little guy against the empire. I'm the little guy against the fate.
I had Shambalamba, or whatever the name of that was, copied on my phone earlier, but I didn't send it over to the audio thing. I get knocked down, but then I get up again. But then again, if I would have put that on YouTube, they might try to block me. How they might try to block me just for singing it so well right then.
Fates. I'm the, that sort of thing. They're not going to say I'm the rugged individual, but they're going to tell you a story about it. And from hearing those kind of stories, you can get what the narrative is. But Brian's absolutely right that even if you ask an American, now, and this is, I think, increasingly so, you're going to hear something.
It's fucking hilarious,
that
isn't it?
We haven't heard up until recently too much of, which is a victim story. A victim narrative. That is.
Who the fuck uses? What kind of loser uses the victim narrative? That's just so fucking pathetic. And I would take this time to remind everyone that Victim of the Swamp is available. freedomstream.tv. We have a link to Amazon, or just at Amazon. Google Freedom Stream. Google Victim of the Swamp, how the deep state destroyed the 40-year-old private. No victims here, though. Buy my book.
Come out more. We see entire cultures that are based on a victim narrative. And so then you get all those stories. That is something that's increasingly obvious here. And that's going to be just like Brian was talking about.
It's not obvious at all to me. First of all, see, now we're really getting into the areas that I question.
There's going to be some conflict. Everybody isn't living the same narrative, even in the United States. So we need narrative analysis.
My narrative is a fucking patriot. A broke dick patriot.
To understand the narrative people are living by, we gather that information by listening to their stories. And then we have to, if we want to influence them, depending on what we want to do, so a bad guy who wanted to influence somebody to do something that they were not inclined to do otherwise might, I call it pathologize the narrative. Kind of in a good way, a really good start is to convince the person that they're a victim. It's really easy if they really are a victim, and a little more difficult. Now,
Victim of the Swamp is singular. Me. I'm the victim here. Literally, lost my job trying to stand up, do what's right, put my country before my company, legitimate. That was the point of it. These people, less than good people, push to their audience, to their Bannon neurotics, that they're the victims, right? And, this lady will go into in just a bit that, all of these stories have like truths to them, but it's how they twist that truth to fit their story, to fit their narrative, for their story to fit their narrative. But, they use these targeted demographics to be able to have like teams of people that take these different stories that they want to put out with a very specific narrative in mind, the client's narrative, and they put those out in such a targeted fashion to millions of people. It makes a big difference. It's what's causing this problem in our country right now and for the last 2 decades.
If they're not, but it can still be
More
done.
Specifically in the last decade.
You paint them as a victim, and you can see this in terrorist recruitment narratives all over, through history and all over the world. The narrative goes something like, we were the land of milk and honey. Everything was great.
This is Akbar.
Until these others came. And then the others brought with them.
Tell me that's not Akbar. Tell me that's not Alex Jones. Holy Jesus, right? Tell me that's not Roger Stone. Although Roger Stone is somebody I would more personally kind of put right next to one of these three. Just put a fourth window up there, a small one on the other side. And that's where you would find Roger Stone. Just beneath these guys. I don't think he would be at that level of the actual process. But not low level at all. I don't know, Bergy found many answers in the PSYWAR video you shared. The entirety makes me feel like me entirety life was constructed. Well, it's not, But that's a problem. You feel like it is. You feel like it is. How much of that's actually true? And how much of that's just fabricated? And how much of it is a result of us training battalions of our youth in the art of misinformation and disinformation and the use of social media? Do you teach your kids that it's okay to lie if you need to win? Because that's the way you do it in life? No, you don't. But we kind of are. Our government kind of is. And they're doing it in response to a very legitimate and real threat. That threat's by other countries. But those other countries are saying that they do it in part because, they're doing it to us. You look at these guys right here and you say, well, okay, clearly we are. So what would happen? I don't know. What would happen if you just removed that woman right there? And these people, the psychological warfare component of the U.S. military, we can still blow shit up. That's fine. We can still have a PAO, which are basically journalists. Why can't journalists do the same thing? Why do we need an organization that specializes in misinformation and disinformation when we've got journalists? And okay, right? And aside from that just being funny the way I said it because it's true, right? It's like, fuck. Why can't the military say, okay, and by the way, journalists, you got to have a code of ethics. By the way, U.S. military journalists, we are taking the high ground. We're not trying to defend ourselves from low ground, right? And try that, right? Because we are escalating the counterinsurgency, counterintelligence at each step to match what we believe is a perceived opponent. But is that opponent even fucking real? Or is that opponent being created by, thousands or millions of VMs that are being operated on that other 80, 90% of servers that the government doesn't even know about? See, there are so many vulnerabilities that I'm trying to explain to everyone. I'm debating sending this commander an email. I don't know, what the fuck? Would that be just a waste of time? Here, I am this. Here's my thing from Major Burris, who's now Lieutenant Colonel Burris, who you replaced in that position as commander. We need to have this conversation. We're coming into an election. We're in an election year. You've got General Flynn putting the Force Psychological Operations group's ghost logo on the spine of his book. You've got Tory standing, running for office, Ohio Secretary of State, wearing a ghost logo T-shirt. Basically, these people, excluding Flynn, I believe Flynn, and probably Tory at this point, what they're doing, Flynn and Tory and Byrne and all of these people, including their cyber warriors and all of these people, what they are doing are exactly what these people are telling us what you would do if engaged with a group that has that residence and What do you do? So Flynn is completely connected to these people. Stuart Rhodes, who was absolutely connected to Flynn, just got sentenced guilty to sedition, to treason. Why don't they tie them together? I can personally put them together. My attorney could put them together. Through Stone, almost certainly. I have incredible information and belief, right? So I have so much information and belief that I personally believe that law enforcement could absolutely make the connection between Kelly, Stewart, Flynn, and Stone. Absolutely. How do we get them to do it? Right? How do we know? How do we know how many people left the Forest Psychological Operations Group? I can guarantee one of the future, and I got to get going on this again here in a moment. Last thought. How do we know that these guys aren't going to impact the next election? We don't. We know that they did. You'll see in one of the next coming up. You'll see we're going to put together several people from not just the Army, but from Force Psychological Operations Group that were directly involved with or participated in the January 6th coup. We know that there are these connections. We gotta stop ignoring these. And I'll stop talking now. I'm worse than the guy with the tie.
All this pestilence, and maybe they're metaphors of crops going bad and bad weather and people don't get along anymore and stuff like that. And a successful recruiter will get a person to internalize that stuff, like there's something wrong in him. And if you don't do something, this is what the future looks like. Our kids aren't even going to remember.
She says recruiter, but it would be, I would say analyst, I believe is what she was referring to.
Our former ways of being. This is going to go on. But if you take certain action, we can turn this around.
This is everything that they're doing.
So that's kind of a common way of...
That's not stop the steal right there, my friends. That's not literally stop the steal right there. It absolutely is.
Of terrorist recruiting.
Yeah, that's a really great example, and certainly something that we've experienced with ISIS is their ability to be able to use the stories to their advantage to generate recruitment. I was curious from a maybe from a national security perspective.
And again, so he just said how he saw that ISIS used those techniques for recruitment. Well, who else is using those techniques? General Flynn, Tory, Alex Jones, Roger Stone, Ali Akbar. Rhodes got busted for treason, convicted. How much of what he did was based on a tactical coordinated psyop by a guy like this right here, or a lady like this, that influenced Stuart Rhodes to take that position of leadership and to go out and effect a coup d'etat, a seditious conspiracy to try to overthrow our government, first in 100 years or so. Chaz, Freedom Stream and TV. Thanks very much, Laura, for sharing that, Chaz. It's hard to pay attention to what's going on in the chat. but I do try to look over there as much as I can. Let's get back to these people here. I hope I made some sense there.
Brian, based on your history and everything, I mean, you talk about the competing stories and everything. I'm curious from your perspective, how well does the State Department, with their embassy country teams, work within that, or even understand that themselves? That sort of everything they do is either contributing to resonance or dissonance within the country.
Real quick, I would add that the State Department did fall under the that act, right? Smith-Mundt Act. The State Department did fall under that. So keep in mind, we often provide support for State Department. State Department now falls under Smith-Mundt. So perhaps that's an area that needs to be looked at by Congress.
Because, of course, when we're talking outside areas of hostilities, for us, the military, we're going in there for special operations. We're tying in with that country team. A lot of times they're the ones giving us the perspective. It may not be us out in the populace, per se, getting that firsthand knowledge. But I'm interested in your perspective on that.
One, the simple answer is it depends. It depends on the embassy. It depends on the personnel. I've met some foreign service officers who were absolute regional and national geniuses. Like, they really got it. They understood the details, and were really value added. And then I met with, I don't know, quite more than the others. So I would say the majority don't. And part of the challenge is, much as is true with the civil affairs community and the PSYOP community, where you guys tend to bounce around from region to region. And even recently,
the civil affairs community he's referring to there would be like the PAO. Journalists working for the United States government. I get that. But once again, they're still journalists. They are reflecting upon a larger group of people that are supposed to be protected constitutionally. And again, that kind of goes back to an argument of, are these guys, even with the best of intentions, doing more damage than good?
well, maybe not super recently, but over the last 19 years, even our special forces community has bounced around quite a bit. So you would get guys.
Okay, I'm liking that tie more and more. I am saying, and I'm glad he's not wearing a flag pin
outside of their regional area of operations. And
look how there's absolutely nothing on the wall behind him, not even a fucking shadow.
And State Department people are expected to go from region to region, and it's the rare person who spends their entire career in one region, because the expectation is they go to 2 or 3. And those guys who go to 2 or 3 tend to be less valuable in terms of helping you to understand.
Hey.
Even if they go to lots of meetings, they're very intelligent.
I was in like 3.
But they don't necessarily recognize the different narratives. I think they will be too quick. What's interesting about Americans is we are too quick to agree. We're too quick to agree with.
Now, again, he's talking about kind of a tolerance that he projects potentially to be built up by people in the PSYOP community when they've been deployed to multiple different regions. And they sort of lose the ability to understand the narrative of the actual community, what they're stating as the indigenous. That's where we really get into the indigenous component, right? So pay attention.
People with whom we're negotiating, I think, because somebody told us that. Maybe it's the guy who wrote How to Make Friends and Influence People. I don't know, that you need to agree with people to get agreement. And we're also too quick to see agreement between cultures. So I've heard lots, both from State Department people and senior military people, that, these guys in country, whatever, X, are, oh, they're just like people I knew and worked with in country H, right? Like I wanted to pick a letter way different than the alphabet. So because like maybe they worked in South America or Central America in their previous job, and now they're working in the Middle East or vice versa. And they will recognize similarities between tribal cultures, maybe in different regions. They'll recognize similarities in people who are struggling with their government, but they won't necessarily recognize the differences. And even though the differences are nuanced, the nuances really, really matter when we're talking about this business. So the example I use, and it's probably not a politically correct example, but is we share about 99%, depending on what study you look at, of our DNA with a chimpanzee. And that 1% is a huge difference. So yes, maybe Iraqis and I don't know, Moroccans are 99% the same, but that 1% can be a huge difference. And if you aren't sensitive enough to recognize those differences, then you can miss.
They did send monkeys into space, but they weren't exactly in charge of the aircraft.
The specifics. Now that's my negative side, and now to be a little bit more optimistic. The key thing is just to recognize, as Ajit suggested, and quite often the State Department can help you do this, is what are the general narratives, or rather, not, well.
Don't over-rely on the confidence and the quality of State Department employees when it comes to disseminating messages. I'm just saying, man, take some of that shit with a grain of salt, what he's saying here. He's probably, these guys are all padding their resumes for the next contract.
It can be a part of their narrative. It depends on how deep our relationship is with that country. But certainly, what are their stories about the United States? Not just what are the government stories, but what are the people on the street stories? That's also a challenge with State Department people, depending on the country, depending on the region. So most of my experience with State Department is in the Middle East. And because the Middle East, walking down the street, has some danger, a lot of State Department folks, a lot of embassy employees did not spend a lot of time talking to average Iraqis or average Jordanians because they were, and in many cases rightfully, concerned about doing that. And as a result, the stories that they heard tended to be educated stories or elite government stories, and they weren't the
Laura Logans or the Sarah Carters that are putting out the stories specifically that guys like that in the uniform tell them to put out. And as long as they put out stories like that, they'll keep their position. They'll keep getting put in these positions. Michael Hastings, not me, Michael Hastings was writing about that. Now I threw in Laura Logan and Sarah Carter just because, they're just, to me, but I mean, to me, they personally screwed me over, both of them. So, they would have, what Michael Hastings was saying completely seems legitimate to me.
Stories on the street and what the average person was saying or how they were interpreting. So in this case, it's like, what is the actual interpretation of data? And how does that work? So an event happens, the United States does something, and how does that get interpreted? I would love to be...
And these things are important, right? But why not take those interpretations that are critical and great and hand those interpretations over to the PAO, right? And allow the PAO to ethically report instead of needing it. Just remove this component. Remove the, we don't always do it or something, but we want to have the ability to lie, because that ability to lie is damaging the trust of everything around. And watch, he's going to talk about trust here very, very soon.
Over in the Middle East right now with all of these
Well, he's
different
talked about it throughout already.
peace deals or recognitions, diplomatic recognition deals being cut. I would love to hear what the person on the street is saying or thinking about them. Because one, that's not getting reported in our media at all. And it is telling in terms of how long lasting it can be. The other part, so one is recognizing that the initial thing, like how are Americans perceived? And because we tend to agree quite quickly as Americans, we also assume that other people do as well. We also, and this is sort of maybe unfair of us, but we tend to look at relationships as transactional more than a lot of cultures. And
Yes.
therefore we think, well, I jokingly say that basically most of our influence operation boils down to bribery or bullying. And as a parent now of 4 adult children, I can shamedly say that a lot of my parenting was bribery or bullying. So
Was it misinformation and disinformation? Okay, I suppose Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, that falls under authorized misinformation and disinformation. But like the shit they were feeding to Stuart Rhodes, Kelly, the people storming the castle on January 6th. No, that's not the same.
I recognize that bribery and bullying can be effective, but that's not the best way to influence, because ideally what you want is you want people to want what you want absent your presence. So absent your bribery or absent your bullying. That's what real influence is. And if you don't understand how you're perceived, then you miss the hard work that you need to do. Like, how hard is the work that you need to do to overcome that? And once again, it really does depend on the quality of the people in the embassy.
Oh shit, we're in trouble.
One of the things I realized.
Look at the smirk on the colonel's face. Just a slight. He didn't want to be, but oh my God, he's holding in a shit-eating grin, like he wants to just kind of spit right now. So that he would have.
As a foreign area officer, that one of my jobs was not like they were better translators of Arabic than I was, but one of the things that translators usually couldn't do is they couldn't translate military speak to State Department speak, and that's a translation process that needs to happen, or even to interpret. Yes, he said those words, but like one of my favorite stories was because I was an exchange officer with the Jordanian army. And so quite often I would be in meetings with U.S. government officials and Jordanians, and I was there as a Jordanian, not there as an American. And so I would be in the meeting before the Americans arrived, and I would be in the meeting after the Americans left, and I would hear how the American words were interpreted. And in some cases,
he probably all he had to do was put on those nice, comfortable white pajamas and slide right in.
I would spend, in one case in particular, I spent 45 minutes explaining what the Americans said. And the Jordanians in the room understood the English, but they understood it as normal English, as, whatever you want to call it, civilian English, I guess. And I had to explain, no, for the military, when he said that actually means this. And I don't know that they ever actually believed me, but it was 45 minutes of trying to convince them that what they were saying was not offensive, that they were actually interested in partnering on this issue, but they just said it in a way that, once again, the Americans thought that there was no problem, because I went to the embassy after that meeting and told them, okay, hey, you need to go and apologize. And they're like, what? We didn't mean that. I'm like, yeah, I know. I spent 45 minutes saying you didn't mean that, but this is what they heard. And recognizing that difference between what you say and what they hear is just absolutely critical. And that gets into
33. Let me go
this
to
narrative aspect, how they
so
filter,
that was
how
the
they
meaning map,
perceive the words you speak.
and
Hey,
that was the meaning map and how messages matter. The message matters. Now at third, I want to go to 3810 here, roughly.
Their identity. Okay. Them out. It'll be received best if it somehow helps them out. And that, bottom line again, is identity. It somehow bolsters
this goes
their
into
identity.
memes.
Okay, I just want to jump in on that really quickly, because one, Ajit is absolutely right, and this is an important point. And when we think about the memes that have value, that sort of stick around and make a difference, is those are memes that are supportive of messages, that are supportive of stories, that are, it's, the military loves talking about nesting things. And for a meme to work, for any little thing, for a commercial jingle to work, whatever that thing to be catchy is, it has to be nested in all of these things in a way that just plays out. And that's why some things work and catch and other things don't.
Yeah.
And when it comes to memes, just to kind of make my point, to help justify my point, and I played this earlier, but it was off the video component of it. It is only 9 seconds, but this, I believe, his comments here were actually focused. Now, it could have been towards Gavin Milley, but I actually think he was referring, when he said OG, he was referring to the little Twitter spat that I had with him when he called me a junkie veteran. So this is where that goes back to, right? But this is Oliver Akbar here. Hold on.
I will call up some friends to dust off some accounts from the Great Meme War, and we'll see who the OG is.
Show me something natural like Afro with your pride. Show me something natural like ass with some stretch marks.
Whoops, sorry about that, folks. I don't know how it jumped back to there. Yeah, I do. That was totally me. But let's go back. Oh, no. Right? So, again, I'm just trying to make the point. How many of these people was Akbar involved in any training? I mean, this is my opinion as a subject matter expert in social media psychological warfare, verifiably. Everything I see with Akbar suggests to me an Islamic terrorist. Now, when I say Islamic, I mean like Al-Qaeda, not Islam as a whole. I'm not going there. I'm not anti-Islam. I'm anti people hijacking legitimate religions, changing the story to fit their narrative. I saw a lot of that in Iraq during the PSYWAR, which these guys were publicly involved with. And that was where they brought the Sunni and Shia together for the first time in like 1,000 years to fight with Americans against AQI, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, who were, again, coming in over the border to tear us apart. Using the exact same playbook as you see with General McChrystal, General Flynn. I'm probably going to go out there and say the General Flynn that's in uniform right now. How do these people keep getting promoted. It's just astounding to me. It's astounding to me. But if you're like, oh, Bergy, there's no big deal about that. Well, these people are being right now tried and convicted for treason, seditious conspiracies. What could be more important? If you're an American, right? And I'm not saying this as part of any type of organization or anything. I guess that's kind of maybe what's the most important thing. I'm still just this dumbass whistleblower, totally blown away at how fucked up our government is, how fucked up law enforcement is, how fucked up my former colleagues have done. They really have. And they are so involved in it, they can't even see it. Or if they do see it, they're so invested in it. The equity is so much that they aren't going to stop and really truly evaluate the second, third order of effects that could be completely changing the fabric of our country. Almost certainly changing the fabric of other countries. And I get it. That's way above my pay grade. I have my opinions on it, but that's not what we're here for tonight. We're here to review this. So shut the fuck up, Bergy, and get moving along.
That's a great perspective. I think, what I come back to is I've seen this evolution over time. And as a psychological operations officer, we're very much about the target audience analysis and trying to look through that cultural lens. And that's why special operations puts us all through this
target audience
training
analysis
when it comes to regional analysis. And they partner.
Target audience analysis is absolutely what the Shadow Net was designed for, built for. Think about it.
Us here where we have PhDs in these cultural areas and everything. But there's still, an echelon within the government, some difficulty because there is that tendency to jump straight to the message. And I do see that more and more now when we're talking about disinformation, because I think that the technique that is utilized is, we'll just expose it. We'll just put out something that exposes that whatever China's doing or whatever is a lie. And then people.
Which is exactly what I've been trying to do, right? To very little success, going after Tory, going after Millie, Gavin, Byrne, all these people, showing everybody, oh, look how bad these people are. Instead of saying, okay, what they're saying is actually, a lot of it's true. But the way they're going about it is wrong. And here's why. That's what essentially I think you're going to conclude from this.
People therefore will care and will therefore, be on board with U.S. government policy objectives. And so I think that's kind of, what's resonating with me is it's that simple exposing of disinformation as a tactic isn't necessarily a panacea to trying to get support for your policies.
Well, here's one of the things I want to jump in, and maybe I'm jumping in on a Jeet here, but when we say China is lying and we wonder why that doesn't resonate, what we're assuming is, because we think we tell the truth, is that the audience to whom we're speaking also thinks we're telling the truth, that we're providing two different coins, right? Like, okay, China's a lying coin, that this is false, and we, on the other hand, are being truthful. So you need to listen to us because we will tell you the truth, but China lies. And of course, that is not how much of the world sees us. And once again, 2020 has sort of shown that that's not how most Americans, or I don't know most,
Here we go.
Certainly a significant chunk of Americans doesn't even perceive that the American government tells the truth. So
okay, there it is.
I think that there's a naivete in.
Okay, so right here, and I had this written down on the thing at 40 minutes. Most Americans don't trust America. that is a statement I agree with. But don't these PSYOP guys know that are known for, it's really hard for me to read this over from where it's at, known for spreading misinformation and disinformation, understand they are part of the problem as they try to figure out the solution here, right? So he's saying, I mean, these guys run an office of misinformation and disinformation, and they're sitting here going, wow, why don't people trust us, right? And it's like, well, people don't trust you because the name of your organization is fucking psychological warfare, for one, and because you are out there doing these things. You are out there damaging journalism. You're out there spreading misinformation, disinformation. It's public information everywhere, assuming that's not misinformation and disinformation, right? You know, Lady Girl says, stop lying. Easy. Well, you know, it kind of is because we're paying these people to lie. Taxpayers are funding this. Shouldn't we have part of it? Shouldn't we be involved in the conversation going on right now that these guys are having? Why don't you as an American care? They're putting this out there online on YouTube. That's why I'm having a conversation about it right now. This is our U.S. government, our Department of Defense, saying we're a psychological warfare unit. This is who we are. This is what we do. This is who we're looking for. And this is what we're going to teach you. And when you leave, these are the opportunities you're going to have. If you're not looking at that and seeing that this is like a huge fucking problem, then you are what they described at the very beginning of it, right? Where you just, you're so sold on the story or the narrative that you don't mind the facts in the story that you're being presented because it makes you feel good. But you got to stop. You got to stop and put that aside and say, hey, I'm an American. I have a responsibility as an American, even if I'm a dumbass like me. I have a responsibility as an American to make sure that my actions, my decisions, the potential for people to be influencing or misleading me are minimized, right? Minimized, because if they aren't, then I'm not being a patriot. Then I'm not being the best American I can be. We need to understand these things.
And how we address this issue of truth.
We're going to be running a little bit late.
That is problematic.
I want to go to 47.
When you talk to public affairs officers, they quite often will say, get the truth out as quickly as possible. And the very implication of what they're saying is that there's one truth, that there is a truth that everybody understands. And I know that, and I'm not trying to get into this whole anything can be true, nothing is true kind of thing. But it is important to recognize that there isn't necessarily one truth, or certainly.
There is one truth. There are variations of context that people may or may not have to a particular truth that either makes it more true or less understood as true. But if it's not true, well, then it's a lie. And then you can go with varying degrees of lies, but it's still a lie.
Only one perception of truth. If
that's where good parenting gets complicated, I'll be honest with you.
You go with that. And I quite often tell my students, hey, we're not talking about truth because this is not a philosophy or a religion class. I mean, if you want to address truth, that's philosophy and religion. If you're
yeah, well, I kind of hope that what does their pastor teach them? They have a church on base there.
Getting at what is our story and why is our story beneficial to you? Why is our story of benefit? I think that there's something fundamentally true that the Chinese story is not of benefit to most global players. whereas the American story does benefit most participants in it.
That's what I was saying earlier. That is, and by the way, I was already shifting to that. I had already came up with this as part of my plan for January 1st going into the new year. Before I even saw this video, this guy saying that. I had already shifted to that plan of taking my focus off of these people. I can't control that shit anyway. And putting the focus on why they are not necessarily wrong about the the concerns that they're raising, but why they're wrong with their solutions for it. And choosing misinformation, disinformation, like Tori Akbar and all these people do for Psychological Operations Group, and choosing misinformation, disinformation, like these people do, right? That we need to look at and say, okay, how is this impacting us as a whole?
And so whether or not the American story is true is actually almost irrelevant to the argument. It is beneficial. So that's why you ought to buy into it, not because that there's some metaphysical truth associated with it. But I think that's just a danger when we use the word true versus lies.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And
Now I want to go to counter message, and counter narratives. A bad idea. Offense narrative, putting your own message out instead of theirs, or providing an alternative meaning within your own context, is more effective than just saying they are wrong, because there is often enough evidence to support their claims, and just countering the message won't help change their minds. So just sitting there, saying, oh, this is wrong, look at what they're saying, and showing them and saying, look, that. No, it's counterproductive in many cases. So this is the 47-minute mark that I wanted to go up to here, and then we'll just about done.
With resonance messages. And when you look at least my understanding, and I'm not an expert in disinformation specifically, but when you look at Russian disinformation and Chinese disinformation, I don't think there are any building messages. There's no resonance messages. They're almost all dissonance messages. And to a degree, that's just easier work. It's a lighter lift. And I think that's why they do
that's
better.
Not accurate,
Ours
though.
is a heavier.
I would disagree with that. Because Russia, at least when it comes to Russia, that's just like, he's just kind of like elbowing Russia there a bit. Because everybody knows that Russia is they are masters of controlled responses, or reflexive control. That, if you look up Google the word reflexive control, that is literally what the Russians named their PSYOP stuff. And so does what this guy is saying here sound like, you would describe reflexive control? I think it does.
Lift if we're trying to build something.
Let me just briefly talk about counter narratives and counter messaging, because I think they're a bad idea. And this kind of goes, following on what Brian said. It's easier to know what to message when we're countering something. But that is really not a good idea in most cases. Unless, because boys, it can really backfire. And we've seen cases of that, unless you really know what you're doing.
I don't.
The other part of that is, it's not a good idea to repeat the adversarial message. Because even, if you put the word no in front of it, or don't do this, say no to drugs, what the brain hears is the adversarial message again.
Drugs.
And the United States of America repeating the message of some group like Daesh. Not a good idea. We're legitimizing it by doing that. And we're not only legitimizing it, we're reinforcing it. So in most cases, I think we should disengage from counter narratives. And that has been, to the extent from what I understand about what the military does in terms of messaging, I think that there's been a real emphasis on counter messaging, counter narratives. To the extent that you guys are talking about narratives, it's been countering. But we need to have an offensive narrative. Defense is all good, but we need to put our own narrative out there.
That's why I said I'm taking the show out of the office. Less than, I think probably about 10 days, maybe less than 10 days, I'm going to have arrival of my new co-host, and there's going to be a lot going on. We got the Bergy-Bit coming in. This is going to be spectacular. But what is it? What I came up with that well before I saw this, and that is taking the message to the people, right? I've always had a very good response with that. And that's what I'm doing now, right? But what I like about this is what she's saying is helping to reinforce the decision I made. Because these are difficult decisions. I don't have a lot of resources to work with. The co-host is costing me out of my pocket. And I'm making a commitment to it, and it's just, right? So this is good to have reinforcement.
And that has to not directly oppose
people like Akbar, Tory, those people. They can't help but do that. They've Flynn, Byrne, they've built the PSYOP, PSYWAR model around that.
Adversarial narratives, but kind of swallow up their meaning. So, for example,
it's why they're losing.
Islam is under attack. That's not a narrative. That's kind of the title of a Daesh narrative, right? Where we see it. And so instead of saying, no, Islam is not under attack, because that's not going to resonate. People have too much information to the opposite. An example would be some sort of story that says, yeah, Islam is under attack, but look who's doing the attacking.
There you go.
So you don't oppose it, but you swallow it up and give it alternative meaning within your own context.
You don't spit, you swallow.
So you provide a context that is larger than that adversarial narrative that reorients its meaning.
I want the record to reflect that I did not call Senator Sanders an ignorant slut.
Okay, I want to put what Ajit said in a military frame, because one, I totally agree with it. But for all those folks out there who were fire supporters, just think about it this way. Nobody builds a fire support plan primarily based off of counter battery fire. And counter narratives are like counter battery fire. They might be necessary because you may, depending on the narrative, you might in fact need to, or the message really, it's not the narrative, but it might be the story, we call it counter narrative, but it's really.
So I want to go up to 5130. This guy does babble like I do.
Narrative. And
to the outpost.
And as part of that training, we're using a lot of movie clips, or I'm recommending that you use movie clips because I'm a big movie fan and I love movie clips. And I just watched this movie the other day. So I cycle on a stationary trainer and watch films. So that's what I do for exercise and enjoyment simultaneously. And
there's a link to The Outpost, which is the movie he's talking about. I don't want to play this because I don't want to. This is the Outpost trailer, but give YouTube the chance, and they will block me for copyright infringement. Jesus. So we're gonna pass on that. But that's what he was referring to there. And it actually looks like a really good movie. I'm just so please, I highly recommend checking that out.
The movie I just watched is a 2020 film called The Outpost. I don't know if either of you have seen it, but it's about Cop Keating in Afghanistan, and 2 Congressional Medal of Honor winners came from that fight that occurred.
Story.
And that film, particularly the first half of it, the second half is mostly the battle and the fighting that occurs there. But the first half probably has 3 or 4 critical moments about narrative and cross-cultural communication that are just absolutely beautiful expressions of how this works and how one communicates a message, or both the value and the problems that come from cultural understanding or a lack of cultural understanding. So I just recommend folks watch that movie. One, it's always good to be reminded of why individuals are awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor.
Right.
But it's also, I think, great to get a sense of why understanding the culture in which you're acting really works and really matters.
It does. You'll see, like in what looks to be. Well, I haven't even seen the movie yet, so I can't opine on it very much, and I'll pass on that. I just wanted to stop and point that out. Then at 58 minutes, narratives change over time, much like rivers change their course. I wanted to end the show, go into the ending of the show with this point that is made right here. It's really well done.
But they already understand. The one thing that I think that is important is narratives exist, and they're not necessarily conscious, as Ajit has said, absolutely true, but narratives also change over time. Much as rivers change their course, right? They will erode and deposit sediment, and they will move over the course of a natural river will, over the course of its lifespan, in many cases, great distances. Narratives will do the same. They will adjust over time. So even if we figure out a narrative now, or we figured out a narrative 20, 30 years ago, what is incumbent on us is to recognize how those narratives are shifting and changing, which is once again why 2020 is such a useful year in understanding the American competing narratives.
Could we agree that election integrity has been a narrative that they've pulled and used and reused for the last 20 years?
That exist out there, because in many cases,
without actually doing anything about it,
they have changed politically. Like I would offer one of the reasons why both 2016 and 2020 have been elections that have generated dissonance is maybe like, and I've been thinking about this, I'm still not 100% certain, but I'm mostly certain, is that they're the first 2 elections where the candidates were speaking to different narratives. One candidate is talking about America is awesome, and the other candidate, even if he's not talking about 1619, he's talking about I have a dream. Like, okay, the system is good, but we've got flaws and we've got to fix them. And the other guy's saying, hey, the system is great and America is awesome and we need to run with it. And so the stories that each candidate told was solving for dissonance in different narratives. And as a result, like the part that I find fascinating when I listen to political pundits is they still act surprised of why President Trump's story did not solve for Democrat dissonance.
This is good.
Or why Joe Biden's story did not solve for Republican dissonance. And what they don't appreciate is the fact that, well, his story wasn't intended to solve for Republican dissonance. It was intended to solve for Democrat dissonance, and vice versa. And this is such a crucial thing to recognize in why we understand the details of recognizing how the narrative exists and what we're doing or other people are doing that might be making it change.
Okay. And what a great place to end on that. What we're doing. You think that you think the we're here might be as a result of everything he described that they do and that they exist to do. I hope you enjoyed the show tonight, right? Because these guys don't seem to understand. They describe the problem, but they don't see that they may actually be the problem. Is all the dissonance that he's describing. Could that separation between the Democrats and the Republican that he's describing, not separations of the story, like we both have the same American narrative like Democrats and Republicans had had in the past, but now, and then politicians sold us these competing stories, right? Now, what he's describing, I believe, is that the Democrats and the Republicans have basically ran on completely separate narratives of America and then separate stories of their separate narratives. Now, what is the most obvious cause of that? The control our government's putting on social media, the selected, the algorithms and the controls and the shadow blocking and the separations that social media and that mainstream media are doing. And how could they be doing that? Oh my God! Well, we look at companies like ClearForce. ClearForce.com, Obama's national security advisor, that builds predictive models, predictive analytics, provides contracts for these guys right here. In fact, an application built for them, the Force Psychological Operations Group. I'm pointing over here, and you guys are going, "Who the fuck over there?" That an application built for them was turned into the shadow net. In which ended up, components of it ended up becoming parts of ClearForce. ClearForce does predictive analytics, predictive behavioral modeling, and then sells those to, well, there, you don't have to guess, their list of clients is on ClearForce.com. CNN, Fox News, AP, The Hill, all of these all of these mainstream media news organizations are using applications built by this company right here, by this organization here, to determine who gets a job and loses a job. If you think that there's something that's, this guy's asking, how did this happen? He doesn't answer. There's like a minute left in this, 3 minutes left in this. He doesn't have the answer for that in the last 2 minutes. I do. I believe these people are the answer to it. They're the solution. They're the problem. We are building, we are creating an army of frickin' sociopaths. Trained in deception, trained in misinformation. And then when we're done with them, or if they fail out for some reason, then we kick them to the private sector. How many of those people that left Force Psychological Operations Group, or 8th or 3rd or 1st, how many left there and went to work for Twitter? There's a good question for you, Elon Musk. And by the way, could you fix freaking at PFC 40 book, please? Thank you very much. Like that back. It's got a lot of information that might help. That could be used as evidence in what I'm talking about right here. But I mean, how many of them left there and went to Twitter? How many left there and went to Facebook? How many left there and went to Atlantic Council, who actually had the contracts funded in part by taxpayers? Again, it's just a repetitive cycle, who helped coordinate this control of social media, control of mainstream media. So what he's describing about how elections are being separated by narratives, which is completely different than we had only 20 years ago or so. I'm telling you, this is how it's being done. This is why it's being done. We need to be part of this conversation. I can't do it by myself, although I'm debating sending them an email. But why do I got to do this? Why do I have to be the one that does this? They're going to think I'm batshit fucking crazy. Or they're going to attack me, or they're going to do this or that. None of it's ever going to be fucking good. I can just guarantee you that. But what am I going to do? And by the way, we're going into the Christmas holiday. Everybody's going on vacation right now, so there's nothing that can be done anyway. The government basically shuts down over the holidays till first part of the year anyway, so it's kind of pointless. I got time to figure some of this shit out. But on that note, I am going to get signed off. I hope you guys enjoyed part 2 due. Friday, we're going to be digging into the same stuff here, but we're also going to try to look at like some of the other things. We're going to try to look at like ShadowNet Enterprise, right? You know, oh my goodness. A lot going on here, folks. A lot going on. He used to be with Google. That is right.
He used to be with Google.
All right, guys, listen. Gonna get signed off here. Awesome. Sometimes you go into a show. I put a lot of time into this, putting together the page / freedomstream.tv/PSYWAR. It's going to have the series on there. You can go to freedomstream.tv, and if you can drop a couple bucks there, that would be so hugely helpful. It's not even funny. If you can't afford to do it, don't do it, please. Just share. If you agree with what I'm saying, share it if you want to help. It is truly appreciated. You can also go to patreon.com/American Awakening. 2 great ways to help. So on that note, I'm going to get signed off, my friends. Thank you very much for everyone who tuned in. We're getting more and more eyes on this every day. I think this is going to start getting the rounds. It's going to start getting more stuff tied to it. I put some stuff out yesterday, I believe, or the day before, yesterday, I think, maybe. So we're putting this all together. Thank you very much, folks. I will see you on Friday, 7 to 9. PFC Bergy signing off now. God bless.
And we're only really here because thus far you've been right.